the views of a thoughtful OG decentralist. Please welcome Erik Voorhees. You are a proper OG, if I may say, because you were first introduced to me back in 2014 by another Erik as well, and he was at level 39 at the time. But you actually have been in the industry before that. Can you tell us about when you got into crypto, the industry?
Yeah. All right. Hi, everyone. I've been in Bitcoin since 2011. May of 2011, I saw a Facebook post from a friend with this article about how there was a form of money that was completely outside the control of the state. So, of course, I clicked on it. And after being a little bit skeptical, I realized, OK, wow, there's this new technology that anyone can use to send value anywhere in the world instantly at near zero cost. No one can stop it, and no one can turn it off. To me, that was obviously going to be revolutionary. And it's interesting that people are still questioning the value proposition of that. Yeah. It's like it's almost so obvious that some people just don't get it. But to be able to have money that you can do whatever you want with as the holder is just so clearly straightforward to me that I got hooked right away. I have a friend from Cambridge, UK, who is a behavioral scientist, nudge theory folk. He will help you understand that question. If you ask him the question, what do humans need to get it? It's very interesting. It is all about behavioral science and nudge theory, but terrific. But actually, let me take you back to Satoshi Dice. In 2014, if I remember correctly, according to what I've read, is you were transacting more than half of Bitcoin at that time. Is that right? Yeah. So Satoshi Dice was the world's biggest Bitcoin gambling game that started as a side project back in 2012 and got a little out of hand. Up through 2013, it was more than half of all the Bitcoin transactions in the world were going to or from this thing. And I had to make the unfortunate decision of either being a leader and advocate for Bitcoin generally, which I care about on a deep philosophical level, or running the world's largest Bitcoin casino. I thought it would not be good optics to be doing both. So ended up selling Satoshi Dice, which I still regret to this day. But that's pretty incredible, though. Half. What is that value, half of all the world's Bitcoin? Don't answer. Somebody with a very big calculator can help us get that number. But then tell us about ShapeShift. Why? Yes. So this has relevance certainly to the air of the room and the ecosystem right now, which is about all this trust stuff. Right? So we've just lived through FTX exploding, which is certainly not nearly the first centralized exchange that has blown up. And back when I started ShapeShift, it was in 2014. It was right after Mt. Gox collapsed. And for those who don't know, Mt. Gox was roughly like 90 or 95% of all the Bitcoin trading back then. And through some combination of fraud and negligence, they lost $400 million of customer funds and went down. And that was proportionally to the size of the industry, that was a much bigger deal than FTX. Like it almost destroyed the entire industry. And the press completely wrote off Bitcoin. All the haters used it to prove their point that this was worthless technology that was going nowhere. And it was really tragic. So I built ShapeShift essentially to be an exchange that didn't require custody. My lesson with Satoshi Dice was using cryptographic primitives, you can build systems that don't require trust in any human being. This is a profound innovation. And just as people could send Bitcoin to Satoshi Dice without knowing who I was, and they could prove that the odds were correct and that the gambling was fair, so too could they send crypto to ShapeShift, and we would convert it and get something sent back to them. We had no custody, and we didn't take any personal information of them. So we protected their privacy. As free and sovereign people, I give people the benefit of the doubt, innocent until proven guilty. And we weren't holding their money. So even if we were negligent, even if we got hacked, we could not lose customer money by how we designed the system. And so I was quite proud of that. And that's what I had been building over the last 8 or 9 years. And a year ago, we decentralized the whole thing, which we can get into also. Well, let's dive straight in. Actually, let's just, before you decentralized it, let's talk about what happened in 2018 when you
that made you start having to take personal information?
When I built ShapeShift to protect people, I was serious about that.
Right.
And that means don't take their personal private information, period. They're not being accused of a crime. Why am I taking their driver's license? Why do I need to know their name? Why do I need to know their email address? I don't need to know any of it. They don't want to give it to me. I don't want it. How about I just treat them as adults and interact with them as a human being, right? Like kind of a revolution.
In the context of self-custody, of course, right?
Yeah, they're holding their assets. If they want to trade from Bitcoin to Ethereum, they go through us. And so that was something I was very proud to have built. And we got legal opinions back then that was fine because we weren't custodial and we weren't handling quote unquote real money, right? We had no fiat involvement. As the industry got bigger and as the regulatory environment changed, the legal analyses too changed. And so after great sums of money spent on lawyers in every jurisdiction on earth, we came to the conclusion that if we did not start violating people's privacy, if we did not start endangering people by taking their personal information, I would probably be sent to jail and the entire company would be destroyed. So we dealt with this moral question for quite a while. What do you do when a bunch of men with guns tell you to do something that's opposed to your ethics? That's a struggle. And I thought, maybe we should shut the whole thing down in protest. But I realized that's not going to help the customers. And then people are just going to be pushed off into other exchanges that are doing all the surveillance as well. So we continued on and we decided to impose KYC and AML, and we built this whole thing that cost tons of money in order to violate people's privacy. We lost something like 98% of our customers because there were smaller businesses that had replicated our model by that point, and they were not doing that. So understandably, the customers went to those venues with less friction. Almost killed the business. All the employees hated it. I hated myself. It was a very dark time. And even so, we still continued to get subpoenaed by nearly every regulator on Earth, and we've continued to deal with those challenges since then. So it was a very dark time, and ultimately I didn't know how to get out of it until I again embraced decentralization and realized that we could actually use decentralized exchanges to outsource the regulated activity of what ShapeShift was doing to immutable protocols that don't care what a politician says. They operate as immutable code. Thereby, we got out of the regulated business ourselves, and thereby we could once again protect people's privacy by not stealing their information.
By the way, thank you so much for your candor. It's actually lovely for people to hear the journey you went through and the internal battles, because clearly you're somebody with very clear values and principles. That must have been incredibly hard. And so I love that you shared that. It's not just plain sailing, right? It's pretty tough to make those kind of decisions. So let's dive into the DAO. I mean, how did you do it? I mean, people are watching this with great interest. Is it going to work long term? How did you do it? What was the structure you set up? And actually, the question is really, how does ShapeShift now shield itself from those challenges?
Yeah. So ShapeShift was a very traditionally established VC-backed company that looked like every other kind of tech startup, right? We had our shareholders, we had a board, we were based in Switzerland, we were a Swiss AG Corp, one of the first ones in Zug. And we have we had an office in Denver, Colorado. At our peak, we had around 150 employees. We had all the normal departments that a normal company has. And today, none of that stuff exists. So how did we go from that to a decentralized ShapeShift? Decentralized ShapeShift simply means that we removed the entity entirely. We open sourced the software. And instead of the app being governed essentially by shareholders and a board, it's governed by token holders. So we have our own token, the Fox token. Holders of that can vote on anything that happens within the DAO. And through that sort of democracy by token vote, you actually get structure and organization. So it's not like a completely flat organization. It's not like everyone gets paid the same thing and has the same job title. There's very much structure and organization. There's different departments We call them work streams. You know, there's a marketing work stream and an engineering work stream and a customer support work stream. But you know what there's not? There's not a legal work stream. There's not a regulatory work stream. Actually, all of our resources now go purely to helping customers, which is a great thing. It doesn't go to all this bureaucracy. We don't have to spend money trying to figure out how to draft an employment agreement with a French employee correctly so that we don't get sued when we don't buy them a bicycle, which is required under French law. Like that kind of nonsense we've gotten completely out of. And it feels incredible. So it's still very much an experiment. Certainly the DAO has its own challenges. And it's been a miserable year for crypto markets. But as an organization, it's been very cool to see that this is actually plausible.
I mean, we're all watching with great interest. I think you've done quite an amazing thing to get that done. You mentioned the challenges. What might they be?
So one of the challenges is that when you democratize governance of an organization to everyone, like anyone with a token is a voter in this way.
Yeah.
It's a higher bar than being a shareholder, which only happens, you know, at certain rounds, and generally only like wealthy investors are participating. So people have all sorts of ideas on like what the right structure should be, and certainly there are people that think it should all be flat, and that no one should ever be fired, and like all sorts of nonsense things. And their voice can get heard based on their token, you know, allocation, just as anyone else. But all of the debate on how you do something becomes out in the open. And this is actually something that I think most organizations would never be okay with, right? So imagine being in your boardroom and having a difficult conversation on, you know, the crypto markets have fallen 50% and you need to cut, you know, half the staff. That's a difficult private conversation. I mean, we dealt with it in 2018. Very sensitive, emotions are high. And as a DAO, that stuff happens in public forums. And the votes happen in public, right? And some of the accounts with tokens are known who they are, so everyone sees what everyone else is doing, and it's a certain amazing degree of transparency that I think some people hate and detest, but really brings people together in a new and interesting way.
Radical transparency, in a sense. I can't imagine those kind of discussion, especially the employee discussion. And actually, the thing that comes to mind is, don't natural leaders emerge regardless of their token holding? And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, a lot of the leaders are not the ones that own a lot of tokens. And indeed, I own the plurality of tokens, and I lead almost not at all. So I am not guiding ShapeShift anymore, you know, in optics or in fact. And it's been very cool to see these strangers from the internet come in, and some of them talk a big game, and then we discover that they're, you know, horribly incompetent. That happens at every organization. But it's very much a meritocracy, and people from anywhere in the world are equal in their ability to interact with us.
You know, in the business schools of the future, they may be studying this as a way of actually evaluating the natural predisposition of employees to actually execute. So you never know, it could be quite interesting. Got me interested in that, actually. I might look into that a bit more. Anybody want to start a business like that? We might be interested to invest. Please let us know. So just now moving, if we can, because this is a conference for investors. And since January 2022, you've been unemployed. So what have you been doing?
Yeah, so being an entrepreneur in the Bitcoin world since 2011, I think aged me by 40 or 50 years. So priority number one was simply to take some time, reconnect with myself as a person, reconnect with my friends and my family who have been, you know, neglected in many ways over that decade. But also crypto is so fast moving. There's so much going on, and to just read and observe and learn about these new projects as they happen is a part-time job in and of itself. So I haven't felt like I have a lot of time that's free, but it's been a little more, and so it's been a great year of reflection, and it's been fun to, you know, like doing that Sam Bankman-Fried interview back in the fall. You know, that was very spontaneous, and I don't know if I would have been able to do that if I had a normal job. So some of those opportunities have come from it.
Oh, I like that one. Well done. So, I mean, you said there's no such thing as a free market, right? When the institution of money itself
important qualifier
is centrally planned and controlled. So what is it then? I mean, is it only partially free? Is it free to price within regulatory constraints? How would you describe it?
Yeah, so this is something I talked about very early in Bitcoin's history when people were skeptical of it. most people in the West are pro-market. Not as radical as me, of course, but they're pro-market, and they believe that they live in essentially capitalist democracies that are essentially market-based economies.
Right.
This is a generalization. Most people in the West look back at something like communism or the Soviet Union, and they have a story in their head of why that was foolish. That something as complex as a market isn't well managed by any central group. What kind of shoes should be produced for a society is best left to the edges of a market, not to the Politburo. And yet, most people hold that view, and the most important good in an economy is money. The most important. It's half of every single transaction. And somehow, people have made this mental leap where not only does the government highly regulate money, but where money comes from and is created is done by central banks under the authority of governments. So the most important good in a market economy, in all over the world, there's like no exceptions here, is money, and it's being centrally planned. Why are people okay with that? Why do people think that if shoes can't be planned, something even more important like money is perfectly fine to be completely handled by a monopoly provider? To me, that's complete absurdity, and the entire ethos of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency around it is about providing an alternative to that viewpoint. So if you're actually pro-market,
Right.
you should first care that the money in that market is a market-based money, and that's all Bitcoin is.
But isn't our proxy in democracies for the control that we might like, if we had the knowledge, of the currencies, democracy, i.e. voting and governments? And so is that proxy not fit for purpose when it comes to money?
I mean, would you guys trust a democracy to decide like what you eat? Would any of you trust it to be up to vote, like what you have for dinner tonight or what kind of nutrition you're allowed to consume?
Well, for health reasons, we're kind of being compelled to think an awful lot about that, yeah.
Sure, right? I think most people would feel very uncomfortable letting 100 million people vote on how they treat their own body, right? As they should. I think most people are just used to money being something of government, even though that is actually a historical aberration.
So it's actually a behavioral science question again. Is an evolution possible? And I mean, can I just check in with you? Do you believe in centrally controlled education, defense, healthcare?
Believe in them. I mean, they obviously exist.
Do you believe they should?
Should people have their money stolen from them in order to bomb people in other countries? Like, personally, I don't want my money taken to go bomb brown people in places I don't know about. I think that's morally repulsive. And I hate that, every year when I have to file taxes, I know that the value that I've created and earned is going to murder people. Maybe some people that doesn't sit as problematic with, but for me, it does. Education is immensely important. Should it be handled by a monopoly provider? Right? Same thing. People tend to not think that monopolies are appropriate for most services, and yet those most important services, people often throw right into the arms of government, even though that's just a monopoly provider. I think it's a hypocrisy in people's mind that is not an examined one, and more people should think about it.
We're going to get to a topic of something that I think interests you eventually in this interview. This is fantastic content, by the way. It's really great. But you just make me think. It's interesting, that people are concerned about CBDCs being programmable money. Would it be conceivable that it would be programmable the other way? So, I'll pay you my taxes, but you're not allowed to spend it on this.
Of course. So everyone should be extremely concerned about CBDCs.
Okay, we'll come to that. I just wanted a quick answer, because the thing I wanted you to share is you're investing, before we get to that question. This audience is keen to know, what are you investing in and why?
Yeah, so I have a little different viewpoint. I mean, I got into Bitcoin for, primarily ideological reasons, because I wanted to change the world with something profound.
Yeah.
And I'm also a capitalist, and so I wanted to make money. And it's incredible that there's this opportunity to actually do both in one environment. So when I invest in things, first of all, I only invest in the crypto world, because that's what I know. When I invest in things, it's not purely like what will make money or not. It's first, is this advancing the ethos of cryptocurrency? Is this actually pulling us away from fiat and banks and toward an alternative, decentralized, market-based financial system. It's impressive how many crypto companies do not satisfy that box. So I care about that a lot. And then, of course, they have to have a great team. And if they are doing good work and I like their product, then I might invest in them.
Any particular application you want to share that interests you?
I always get a little uncomfortable shilling my own book here, but since this is largely an investor conference, and I've been very public about
It's okay, just between us, it's fine.
So Thorchain, stupid name, amazing project, is something I've been in love with since I learned about it a few years ago. Thorchain is essentially a DEX, a decentralized exchange, but it's the only one in the world today that operates across blockchains. The only one. So if you have Bitcoin and you want to buy Ethereum without an intermediary, which should be like a very basic, precept of this ecosystem, there's only actually one way to do it, and that's on Thorchain. It's an incredible achievement. The technology is built using multi-party computation, and I think a lot of people don't get past the name, but it's been very cool and something I've been very proud to be involved in.
It's all right. It's okay to say that kind of thing at a conference like this. People are genuinely interested to learn. And you've shared some really fascinating insights. It's interesting, one of the insights reminds me to one of the things that Stacey Warden said on the last panel about the freedom for, say, a single parent or a woman in a country where women don't have control to actually have control over their own money, right? So let's go to that, because I think that the topic that is interesting is, what are you worried about at the moment, and what should we think about it?
What am I worried about? Should we get into the CBDC discussion?
Let's go for it. Come on. Don't hold back.
Okay. So first of all, CBDCs are kind of funny because central bank digital currency, like the currencies you're already using from central banks are already digital. Dollars are already digital. Euros are already digital. Swiss francs are already digital. And they're all from central banks. But getting past that, the reason that central bank digital currencies are so scary and that everyone should be very worried about is because they give complete omnipotence and omniscience to a central group. That should worry anyone, right? Why would you ever want something so important as your entire financial livelihood to be completely controlled and surveilled in that way? It's already bad enough in the world we live in, but a central bank digital currency can start doing all sorts of horrible stuff. And it's not theoretical, it's actually happening already in China. So China is the example of like where the West will go if they allow themselves to consume this poison of giving complete sovereignty and control over all forms of money to a central body. Things like, if you donate to the wrong politician, you have your entire bank account frozen. Right? That's not even a radical example. Things like, if you don't spend your money fast enough, meaning like if you haven't spent 50% of your paycheck within 30 days of receiving it, it'll start to decline in your balance by 1% a day. Why would that be done? To encourage demand, right? We're fighting a recession. Why don't we just use the powers that we have to incentivize people to spend the money? You can imagine the technocrats having this kind of power over money and using every good moral justification in order to control how people spend things.
And they will. They'll have great justification.
They absolutely will. Some of the things they do might actually be beneficial, right? I give the benefit of the doubt to them in terms of their intentions. But I don't think any of you would be very comfortable with certain leaders in the past having full control over your bank balance.
Well, even being able to cancel your money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that it hasn't happened in other areas, Cyprus and things like that. The Greek, the financial crisis, but there the money wasn't cancelled; it was taken control of by.
Yeah, I mean, you use the word you want to use. We could consider that today, if you have an 8% inflation rate, your money is actually being cancelled at 8% per year. This is another way of thinking about it.
Pity the deflationary powers of crypto don't apply. As in, wish that was burning. That would be better. All right, that's just fantastic. And so we've got about 4 minutes left. And just to say, though, this is not the last opportunity you'll have. I mean, the point of this is to do exactly what it's done for me, which is help to provoke some thinking about the future and the way forward. So, what? Really, I mean, what do you hope for in 2023? Let's just start with 2023.
Yeah, I think the single most important thing for the entire ecosystem right now is to make the clear distinction between the abysmal year that happened last year and the core reason that occurred, which was that people trusted central financial intermediaries. Every catastrophe from 2022 had to do with central financial intermediaries. And it gets painted as a crypto problem. And so regulators come in and are like, okay, we need crypto regulation. It's not a crypto problem. It's a central financial intermediary problem. A lot of these firms that blew up were heavily regulated. They were heavily regulated. Fraud is already illegal, right? Like, how is Sam able to commit all that fraud when fraud's illegal? Maybe it's because that kind of rule just doesn't work. It has no teeth. It does not actually prevent things from happening. It just dissuades them. And what people should understand going forward is that we have this actual alternative called DeFi, programmable, immutable, open money systems, which act perfectly according to their code. Certainly the code needs to be checked very thoroughly, and certainly there will be mistakes there, but you can know what it does based on the code. You can know before it acts how it will act. And this is profound for finance. Everywhere else in finance, everywhere else in traditional finance, you have people subjectively making decisions all the time. And many of their decisions are good, and some of them are bad, and some of them are catastrophic. But we now have a technology that allows us to have a money system that works in a way that you a priori know how the outcome will be. That is what matters, right? And so when people see everything that happened last year and they use that as a ding against crypto, they're really missing the point. Last year was an example of why cryptocurrency is so important, specifically why decentralized platforms that are immutable and do not have the manipulations of people involved, why that is a superior system to anything based on individuals that are at a central institution controlling money.
In the preparation for this, I asked you a question, and I'm going to tell you what your answer was because I want you to unpick it, which was, why should we care about decentralized systems? And your answer was, it made me think a lot, I wrote it down, because it maps at a higher resolution to the reality of individuals being the seat of consciousness. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, that's heavy. I think people too often forget that they themselves are individuals and that all of us have our own experience, right? We come from different places in the world, we have different backgrounds, and we should celebrate that individuality as something profoundly human. The reason that markets are moral and noble and good is in part because they allow that individuality to be expressed. The opposite of this is central groups that plan things have to, and are indeed told to, homogify the system that they're working on. And when you do that, sometimes you get efficiency gains, that's for sure. But you also start to lose like the individualism of the participants. And so, going back to the Soviet Union and the shoes creation, if the government is making shoes, everyone is going to have a similar looking shoe, right? Or there will be like 3 different types.
Yeah.
And you can imagine people making the argument that like, why should there be, look how many kinds of shoes there are, right? I know people with like 100 pairs of shoes that they almost never wear. It's art, right? And that art and that individualism is something profoundly important to humanity. And so if we can maintain that through markets generally, if we can maintain that through decentralization as a principle, I think humanity is better served and we will live a richer experience.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you. It's just terrific. It is exactly what we hoped for. A thoughtful person in this industry, and you certainly have provoked the thinking. And it doesn't stop here. Just to remind all of us that immediately now, following this, all of the speakers are going to go to the Q&A bubbles just outside on the left, where you have an opportunity to continue discussion. Erik, can I just say thank you for helping to expand my thinking as well, and I think you've certainly provoked some ideas, but also helping us remember the humanity of the industry that we represent. It was a terrific interview. Thank you so much. Erik Voorhees.
Thank you.
Thank you.